The alarm screamed through the bridge of the cargo ship Prosperity. Captain Hana Kang jumped from her seat, her coffee spilling across the metal floor. The red warning lights painted everything in blood-colored shadows. "What is that?" she demanded, rushing to the communications panel. Lieutenant Minho Park pressed buttons with shaking hands. His face had gone pale. "It's a distress call, Captain. From Vela 7, the mining colony." Hana leaned over his shoulder, reading the message that scrolled across the screen. Her heart dropped into her stomach. The words were simple but terrible. "Under attack. Massive hostile force. 200,000 civilians trapped. Please help, please." The message repeated over and over like a prayer no one was answering. "How far are we?" Hana asked, though she already knew the answer would complicate everything. Minho checked the navigation systems. 4 days at maximum speed. "But Captain, we're a cargo ship. We carry food and supplies, not weapons. And our orders are to—" "I know what our orders are." Hana cut him off. She stared at the distress message, watching it loop again. 200,000 people. Men, women, children from dozens of different species. And somewhere in that colony were 47 human engineers. Her people. She made her decision in 3 seconds. Change course. "Take us to Vela 7. Minho's eyes went wide. "Captain, that's against regulations. The company will— I don't care what the company says." Hana's voice was steel. "Someone is asking for help. We're going." Far across the galaxy, in the gleaming silver towers of the Galactic Council Station, Ambassador Yuna Choi stood before the council chambers. The massive room held representatives from 847 worlds. Beings of every shape and size filled the floating seats. Creatures with scales, fur, feathers, and stranger things that had no names in human languages. At the center, on the highest platform, sat Counselor Thex Prime. His insect-like body clicked and chittered as he moved. His compound eyes reflected the lights in 1,000 directions. "Ambassador Choi." Thex Prime's translator made his voice sound cold and mechanical. "You bring this matter before us again. We have already discussed the Vela 7 situation." Yuna fought to keep her voice calm. "Discussed? You've been talking for 3 days while people die. That colony needs help now. Not in 6 weeks when your fleets finally decide to move." A murmur ran through the council chambers. Several representatives shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "The protocols must be followed," another counselor said. This one looked like a floating jellyfish, its body pulsing with bioluminescent light. "We cannot simply rush military forces into every crisis. There are procedures, forms, approvals needed from—" "People are dying," Yuna's shout echoed through the chamber. 200,000 civilians, including children. The swarm is tearing through their defenses. By the time your procedures are complete, there won't be anyone left to save. Thex Prime's mandibles clicked together in what might have been annoyance. "Your species has been part of this council for only 15 years, Ambassador. You do not understand how delicate these matters are. The swarm is dangerous, yes, but sending forces without proper authorization could create diplomatic incidents with—" "Diplomatic incidents?" Yuna couldn't believe what she was hearing. "You're worried about paperwork while thousands of beings are fighting for their lives?" "Your kind always thinks with emotion rather than logic," Thex Prime said, and his tone carried clear contempt. "This is why humanity remains on the outer edge of council membership. You are too unaggressive, too quick to violence. Your Deathworld made you unstable." The word hit Yuna like a slap. Deathworld. That's what they called Earth, a Category 4. Deathworld, where everything was trying to kill everything else, where the gravity was crushing, the diseases were deadly, and the predators were nightmares. Humans had crawled their way to the stars from a planet that most council species would consider a hell dimension, and the council never let them forget it. "This session is concluded," Thex Prime announced. "We will reconvene in 2 days to continue discussions about the appropriate response to—" Yuna didn't wait to hear the rest. She turned and walked out of the chamber, her hands clenched into fists. Behind her, she heard the whispers of the other ambassadors. Knew they were talking about the violent human, the aggressive Deathworlder who couldn't control her emotions. She didn't care. In her private office, Yuna activated her personal communications array. This one wasn't connected to the council networks. It was a direct line to Earth, encrypted and private. Her fingers flew across the controls as she composed the message. She knew what she was doing was against regulations, knew it could end her career, knew the council would be furious. She sent it anyway. "To all human vessels and Earth Defense Command, Vela 7 colony under attack by the swarm. 200,000 civilians, including 47 human engineers. The Galactic Council has refused to send aid. They're talking while our people die. Vela 7 coordinates attached. Anyone who can help, please. The Council has abandoned them. She hit send and sat back in her chair, her heart pounding. Within minutes, her message bounced through the human communication network, jumping from relay to relay. It reached mining stations on the edge of human space, trading posts where human merchants gathered, science vessels exploring distant stars, and finally it reached Earth. In the Pacific Defense Headquarters, deep beneath the ocean, Admiral Jiho Nam read the message 3 times. Around him, his command staff stood silent, waiting. "How fast can we mobilize the fleet?" Jiho asked quietly. "The entire fleet, sir?" His second-in-command looked shocked. "That would be 247 warships. It would take at least— I didn't ask how long it would take. I asked how fast we can do it." Jiho's eyes were hard. "We have people out there. Human people. And others who need help. How fast?" The officer swallowed. 18 hours if we skip all standard procedures. "But sir, the council can sanction us later." Jiho stood up, his decision made. "Send the order. Full fleet mobilization. Every ship that can fly. We're going to Vela 7. Sir, what do we tell the council when they object?" Admiral Jiho smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Tell them that humans take care of their own. And anyone else who needs help." Across Earth, alarms sounded in naval bases. Crews rushed to their ships. Weapons were loaded. Engines were fired up. The largest military deployment since humanity's own brutal wars began to move. The Deathworlders were coming, and they were bringing everything they had. The Prosperity dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Vela 7 system. What Captain Hana Kang saw on her screens made her blood run cold. The colony was burning. Dozens of ships swarmed around the small moon like insects around a dying animal. They were unlike anything in the Council database. Organic and mechanical fused together in ways that hurt to look at. The swarm, biomechanoid raiders that consumed everything in their path. "Captain," Minho's voice was barely a whisper, "we should run. We can't fight that." Hana stared at the screen. He was right. Her cargo ship had no weapons. Her crew was 12 people. Against what she was seeing, they were nothing. But on the surface of Vela 7, 200,000 people were dying. "Send a message to the colony," Hana said. "Tell them we're here. Tell them to hold on." On the surface, Chief Engineer Daehyun Lee read the message on his damaged screen. Around him, the mining colony's command center was chaos. Aliens from 23 different species huddled against the walls, their eyes wide with terror. The sounds of the swarm cutting through the outer doors echoed through the corridors. A cargo ship? One of the aliens, a being with blue skin and 4 arms, laughed bitterly. "One cargo ship? That's what came to save us?" Daehyun ignored him. He activated the colony's communication system. "Captain Kang, this is Engineer Lee. We have 47 humans down here, plus about 20,000 civilians in this section. The swarm has breached sectors 1 through 5. We're falling back to the central habitats, but we won't last much longer. We're coming down." Hana's voice crackled through the speakers. "Hang on. The Prosperity wasn't built for atmospheric entry, especially not combat entry." But Hana pushed the ship hard, diving toward the colony at speeds that made the hull scream. Swarm fighters peeled off to intercept them. Minho jerked the controls left and right, dodging weapons fire that lit up the darkness. They hit the landing pad hard. The ship bounced twice before the landing gear locked down. "Everyone, grab whatever you can use as a weapon," Hana ordered her crew. "We're going into the colony." Her people didn't hesitate. They grabbed tools from the cargo bay. Crowbars, plasma cutters, anything heavy or sharp. One crew member found an old mining drill and hefted it like a spear. They looked ridiculous. 12 humans with improvised weapons against an army of biomechanoid killers. They went anyway. Far above, on Earth, Dr. Suji Huang stood before 3,000 naval officers in the fleet briefing room. On the massive screens behind her, images of the swarm rotated slowly. "You're about to face an enemy that has conquered 47 worlds," Suji began. Her voice was calm, professorial. "They are faster than most council species, stronger. They don't feel fear. They don't negotiate. They consume and move on." The officers watched in silence. "But they have never faced a Deathworld species in combat." Suji continued. They don't know what evolution on Earth made us. Every council species comes from nice worlds. Safe worlds. Worlds with one sun, normal gravity, and where most things won't kill you. She pressed a button. Images of Earth filled the screens. Hurricanes, earthquakes, lions hunting prey, great white sharks, grizzly bears, poisonous snakes and spiders. Earth tried to kill us for millions of years, Suji said. It made us persistent hunters who can track prey for days. It gave us throwing accuracy that no other species possesses. It forced us to think strategically to survive. And most importantly, it gave us the ability to keep fighting through pain and injury that would put any council species into shock. She looked across the assembled officers. The swarm is about to learn why Earth is classified Category 4 Deathworld. Show them what that means. The fleet launched 18 hours after Ambassador Yuna's message. 247 warships from massive carriers to small destroyers. They accelerated to speeds that made Council navigators sick just thinking about them. Humans could handle the G-forces. Barely. But they could handle them. Admiral Jiho Nam stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Indomitable, watching the stars streak past. His communication officer looked nervous. "Sir, we're receiving an official transmission from the Galactic Council. They're ordering us to stop. They say this action is outside human jurisdiction and will result in sanctions." Jiho didn't even turn around. Reply received and noted. "Continue on course." "Sir, they're threatening to—" "I don't care what they're threatening," Jiho said calmly. "We have people out there who need help. The Council had their chance to act. They chose politics over lives. We're choosing differently." At Vela 7, Captain Hana and her crew had linked up with Engineer Daehyun and his team. Together, the humans had organized the panicked aliens into defensive positions. They blocked corridors with mining equipment. They set up choke points using whatever materials they could find. When the swarm came through the Eastern Passage, Daehyun and 6 other humans met them head-on. They used mining lasers as weapons, cutting through the biomechanoid soldiers. When those ran out of power, they used tools. When those broke, they used their hands. The aliens watched in shock as the humans fought. One human had a broken arm but kept fighting with the other. Another was bleeding from a head wound but refused to fall back. They moved with a coordination that seemed almost supernatural, reading each other's positions, covering each other's weaknesses, fighting as a single unit. "Why don't they stop?" An alien civilian asked, watching a human woman with a badly injured leg still holding the defensive line. "Why don't they retreat when injured?" "Because if we retreat, you die," Daehyun said simply, not taking his eyes off the corridor. "That's not acceptable." The concept seemed to confuse the alien. In Council space, wounded soldiers retreated immediately for medical care. Fighting through injury was considered irrational. Barbaric even, but the humans didn't stop. For 72 hours they held. Captain Hana's crew and Daehyun's engineers fought in shifts, barely sleeping, surviving on stimulants that would poison most Council species. The aliens they protected began to understand something fundamental about humans. They didn't know how to give up. Then, on the 3rd day, the sensors lit up. Ships were arriving. Lots of ships. Commander Hyun Shin led the Vanguard Force, 20 of the fastest human destroyers. They dropped out of FTL at speeds that made the swarm's sensors scream alerts. The deceleration forces would have killed most Council species. Human crews just gritted their teeth and held on. "All ships." Hyun's voice cut through the communication channels. "Weapons free. Show them what Earth sends to protect its people." The human ships hit the swarm fleet like a hammer. They didn't use the careful, precise tactics of Council warfare. They used human tactics, aggressive, overwhelming, and utterly ruthless. Ships that got damaged didn't retreat. They pressed harder, ramming if necessary. Pilot Nari Choi flew her fighter through formations that no Council pilot would attempt. She rolled and spun at G-forces that pushed the limits of human tolerance, her reflexes honed by millions of years of evolution tracking fast-moving prey. Her weapons fire was impossibly accurate, her brain calculating trajectories instinctively. The swarm had conquered 47 worlds using fear and overwhelming numbers. But they had never faced an enemy that didn't feel fear the same way. Had never fought beings that had evolved on a world where giving up meant death. On the colony surface, Captain Hana heard the explosions overhead, looked up to see swarm ships burning in the atmosphere. She activated her communication device with shaking hands. "This is Captain Hana Kang on Vela 7. Human forces, is that you? Affirmative, Captain, came the reply. Admiral Jihonam sends his regards. The cavalry has arrived. Hana felt tears run down her face. Around her, the aliens they'd been protecting for 3 days stared upward in wonder and disbelief. The Deathworlders had answered the call. Commander Hyun Shin watched the tactical display as more human ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel. The main fleet was arriving, and it was beautiful and terrible at the same time. 227 warships materialized in the Vela 7 system within 10 minutes. The swarm's biomechanoid intelligence registered the new arrivals and calculated their threat level. The calculation came back with an error. The numbers didn't make sense. These ships were moving too fast, taking risks that defied tactical logic, and there were so many of them. All fighter wings launch, Hyun ordered. Target the swarm ships attacking the colony. Let's clear them out. Pilot Nari Choi led her squadron toward the largest cluster of swarm vessels. Her wingmates flew in formation. Their movements synchronized through thousands of hours of training and something deeper. The pack mentality that humans had carried from the African savanna to the stars. A swarm fighter came at her head-on, firing biological projectiles that tracked heat signatures. Nari rolled her ship in a corkscrew pattern, her hands moving faster than conscious thought. Her ancestors had survived by throwing spears at running prey, calculating trajectory and movement instinctively. That same ability let her place weapons fire with impossible accuracy. She fired. The swarm fighter exploded. That's 23, her wingmate pilot Junho called over the comm. You're showing off now. Just getting warmed up, Nari replied. Already targeting the next enemy. On the colony surface, Captain Hana watched through the command center's damaged windows as human fighters streaked across the sky. Swarm ships fell in flames one after another. The aliens around her stood in stunned silence. How are they doing that? The blue-skinned alien engineer asked. Those maneuvers should be impossible. The G-forces alone would. Humans come from a high-gravity world, Daehyun explained, checking his makeshift weapons. Our bodies are built to handle forces that would crush most council species. Our reflexes evolved to track fast-moving prey and avoid fast-moving predators. We're literally built for this. But the injuries, another alien said, pointing at a human woman who was bandaging her arm while simultaneously coordinating defensive positions. She should be in medical care, but she's still fighting. Daehyun smiled, but it wasn't a happy expression. On Earth, if you stopped fighting every time you got hurt, you died. So we evolved to push through pain, to keep going when any rational being would quit. Some call it stubbornness. We call it survival. A massive explosion rocked the colony. The swarm had launched a ground assault, trying to overrun the defenders before the human fleet could secure orbit. Biomechanoid soldiers poured through the breached walls, their weapons tearing through metal and stone. Here they come, Hana shouted. Everyone, defensive positions! The human marines from the newly arrived ships were still 10 minutes out. The colonists had to hold until then. Hana hefted her plasma cutter, now modified into something resembling a weapon. Around her, her crew took their positions. They'd been awake for 80 hours, pumped full of stimulants that would have stopped the hearts of most council species. They were exhausted, injured, and outnumbered. They didn't retreat. The swarm came through the corridor like a wave of death. Hana fired her makeshift weapon, the plasma cutting through organic armor. Beside her, Minho fought with a metal bar, using it like the clubs that humanity's ancient ancestors had wielded against predators. An alien defender went down, injured. 2 humans immediately moved to cover him, dragging him back while still firing at the enemy. The concept of leaving no one behind was hardwired into human psychology. It made no tactical sense. Why risk 2 fighters to save 1 injured soldier? But humans didn't think like that. Couldn't think like that. Millions of years of tribal living had made it instinctive. Protect the pack or the pack dies. The swarm soldiers were efficient killing machines, their biomechanical bodies optimized for combat. But they fought as individuals. Humans fought as a unit, each member covering another's weaknesses, moving with practiced coordination that came from being social hunters for millions of years. It made all the difference. Transport arriving, someone shouted. Human Marines are here. The transport ship came in hot landing gear, barely touching the ground before the doors opened. Sergeant Taeho Kwan led his Marine squad out at a run, their armor painted in Earth's colors, blue and green and white. They hit the swarm forces like a sledgehammer. Marine training was brutal by Council standards. Council soldiers trained for 6 months. Human Marines trained for 18, subjected to physical and psychological pressures that would break most species. They learned to fight in every environment Earth could create, from Arctic ice to tropical jungles, to the thin air of mountains that pierced the clouds. Tejo moved through the corridor, clearing swarm soldiers with practiced efficiency. Behind him, his squad advanced in perfect formation. When one Marine's weapon jammed, another covered him without being asked. When one fell injured, 2 more dragged him back while maintaining fire. Sector secured, Tejo reported, moving to the next breach. In orbit, Admiral Jiho Nam watched the tactical display. The swarm fleet was being systematically destroyed. Human ships pressed the attack with an aggression that made the biomechanoid intelligence recalculate its survival odds. The calculation came back 0%. The swarm began to retreat. Don't let them leave the system, Jiho ordered. I want every single one of their ships destroyed or captured. They attacked civilians. They don't get to run. His tactical officer looked uncertain. Sir, Council doctrine says we should accept surrender if offered. We should. Council doctrine let those people down there die for 3 days, Jiho cut him off. We're not following Council doctrine. We're making sure the swarm never threatens anyone again. The human fleet pursued. It was a kind of warfare the Council had never seen, not for territory or resources, but for something more primal. The swarm had threatened the pack. That could not be forgiven, could not be forgotten. On the Galactic Council station, Ambassador Yuna Choi stood in her office watching the live feed from Vela 7. Around her, communication requests from dozens of council members piled up, all demanding explanations. Councillor Thex Prime's face appeared on her main screen, his insect features twisted in what might have been anger or confusion. Ambassador, this is outrageous. Your species has deployed a military fleet without authorization. You have engaged in combat operations outside your jurisdiction. The sanctions for this will what? Yuna asked, her voice cold. You were willing to let 200,000 people die because you were worried about paperwork. You called humans aggressive and violent and too dangerous for civilized space. Well, Counselor, you were right about one thing. And what is that? We are dangerous, Yuna said quietly. But not to people who need help. Only to those who hurt the helpless. You should have sent help 3 days ago. We sent it in 18 hours. This is not how civilized species. Then maybe civilization needs to be redefined, Yuna interrupted. Because from where I stand, refusing to help people in need seems pretty uncivilized. She cut the connection before Thex Prime could respond. On Vela 7, the fighting was ending. The swarm ground forces were dead or captured. In orbit, the last swarm ships were being destroyed by human fighters. The colony was saved. Captain Hana sat down against a wall, finally allowing herself to feel the exhaustion. Around her, aliens and humans alike collapsed, the adrenaline finally wearing off. A young alien child, some species Hana didn't recognize, approached her carefully. The child held out a piece of bread. For you, the child said in broken standard. Thank you for protecting us. Hana took the bread with trembling hands. She couldn't speak around the lump in her throat. This was why they'd come. Why they'd risked everything. Not for glory or politics or even for their own people specifically, but because someone had asked for help and humans couldn't ignore that call. It was what made them dangerous, and what made them human. Admiral Jiho Nam stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, looking at the tactical display that showed what remained of the swarm fleet fleeing toward deep space. His tactical officer, Lieutenant Minji Song, worked at her station with focused intensity. Admiral, the swarm is attempting to retreat to their staging area, Minji reported. Long-range sensors show more ships gathering there. If they regroup, they could come back stronger. Jiho's jaw tightened. The council would tell him to be satisfied with saving Vela 7. 2. Let the swarm escape and deal with them through diplomatic channels and careful military planning. But Jiho had seen the footage from the colony, had seen what the swarm did to civilians. Humans had a word for the feeling burning in his chest. Righteous fury. All ships, he ordered. We pursue. Terra protocols are now active. Across the fleet, commanders received the order with grim understanding. Terra protocols, combat doctrines developed from Earth's brutal history of warfare. Tactics that the Council considered too aggressive, too risky, too violent for civilized species to use, perfect for a species from a Category 4 death world. The human fleet accelerated beyond safety margins, pushing their engines to levels that made Council engineers nervous just reading about them. They moved like predators who had scented blood, following the swarm back to its nest. Sergeant Taiho Kwan and his Marines were still on Vela 7, securing the colony and treating wounded. Medical Officer Jisoo Park worked in the makeshift hospital, surrounded by injured aliens who stared at her human patients with confused fascination. "Why is he still conscious?" an alien doctor asked, pointing at a human Marine with a broken leg. "The pain alone should have put him in shock. He should be sedated." Jisoo continued working as she answered, "Human pain tolerance is different. Our bodies produce chemicals that help us push through injuries. On Earth, stopping to treat every wound meant death. We evolved to keep moving. But that's..." The alien doctor struggled for words. "That's insane." "Probably," Jisoo agreed. "But it kept our ancestors alive." She moved to another patient, a human woman with burns across her arm. The woman was sitting up, eating a ration bar with her good hand while simultaneously helping translate medical terms for alien patients who didn't speak standard well. The alien doctor watched in disbelief. "On my world, someone with those injuries would be unconscious from the trauma." "On our world," Jisoo said quietly, "someone with those injuries would still have to watch for predators. Pain is just information. We learn to receive the information and keep going anyway." In space, the human fleet reached the swarm staging area. It was an asteroid field converted into a massive military base, with biomechanical ships docked at growing stations and factories churning out more swarm soldiers. "Target analysis complete," Minji reported from her tactical station. "Estimate of enemy forces. Approximately 600 ships in various stages of readiness plus ground installations producing more. Recommended strategy from the combat computer is to call for Council reinforcements and lay siege to..." "Negative," Jiho interrupted. "We're not giving them time to finish those ships. All vessels break into assault formations. We're going in." His second-in-command looked worried. "Sir, the combat computer calculates our odds at..." "The combat computer doesn't understand humans," Jiho said. He activated the fleet-wide channel. "This is Admiral Jiho Nam to all ships. The swarm thought they could attack civilians without consequence. They thought we would follow Council rules and give them time to regroup. They were wrong on both counts. Terra Protocol 7 is now active. Show them why Earth survived." Terra Protocol 7. Overwhelming assault using speed, aggression, and unpredictability. It was based on tactics from Earth's ancient history, from Mongol cavalry charges to Viking raids to modern blitzkrieg warfare. Fast, brutal, and decisive, the Council had studied these tactics and deemed them too dangerous for civilized use. Too much risk. Too much aggression. Too chaotic to control. Humans called them effective. The fleet split into strike groups, each approaching from different vectors. They didn't come in the neat, organized formations Council doctrine demanded. They came in patterns that looked almost random, but were actually carefully calculated. Chaos, designed to overload enemy defensive. Calculations. Commander. Hyun led a group of destroyers through the asteroid, field at speeds that made navigation computers scream warnings. They wove between rocks using reflexes honed by a species that had learned to throw stones accurately enough to bring down prey at 50 meters. "Incoming. Fire from the defense platforms," his weapons officer reported. "Return. Fire and keep moving," Hyun ordered. "Don't give them a stable target." His ship rolled and twisted through three-dimensional space, dodging weapons fire while simultaneously targeting enemy installations. The movement would have made most Council species violently ill. Humans just gritted their teeth and held on. Pilot Nari Choi led her fighter squadron directly at a swarm carrier, a massive ship that dwarfed her small craft. Council doctrine said fighters shouldn't engage capital ships directly. It was suicide. Nari's squadron did it anyway. They came in low and fast, targeting the carrier's weapon systems with precision fire. When one of her wingmates took damage and his weapons failed, he didn't retreat. He accelerated to ramming speed and crashed his fighter into the carrier's command section. "Junho," Nari screamed. "Got them," came the weak reply over the comm. "Tell my family. Tell them I made the shot count." Then silence. Nari felt tears on her face but didn't slow down. Couldn't slow down. Yunyo had created an opening. She would make it count. Her squadron poured fire into the gap Junho had created, targeting internal systems. The massive carrier began to list its power systems failing. On another front, Sergeant Tejo and his Marines had volunteered to board one of the half-constructed swarm ships. They flew across open space in assault shuttles, magnetic boots pulling them toward the enemy vessel's hull. "Remember," Tejo said to his squad, "the swarm doesn't know how humans fight in close quarters. We spent millions of years learning to fight with our hands. Show them what that means." They breached the hull and entered the ship. What followed was the kind of fighting that the Council had banned as too brutal for modern warfare. Hand-to-hand combat in narrow corridors, fighting with knives when ammunition ran out, using improvised weapons when those broke. The swarm soldiers were efficient and deadly, but they'd been designed to fight at range. They weren't prepared for an enemy that would grapple with them, that would fight with a ferocity born from being both predator and prey on a world that tried to kill everything. Taiho's squad cleared the ship deck by deck. When they finished, they moved to the next one. Medical Officer Jisoo, back on Vela 7, received casualty reports from the battle. The numbers made her heart hurt. Humans were dying up there, but the reports also showed something else. Wounded humans continuing to fight. Injured Marines still coordinating their squads. Pilots with broken bones still flying their ships. "They don't stop," she whispered, reading the reports. "No matter what happens to them, they don't stop." An alien medical student working with her overheard. "Is that a human strength or a human madness?" "Both," Jisoo answered honestly. "It's both." The battle raged for 6 hours. Slowly, impossibly, the human fleet pushed through the swarm defenses. They used tactics that shouldn't work. Ramming attacks, boarding actions, close-range fighting that the Council considered antiquated and foolish. But the swarm had optimized their defenses against Council-style warfare. Careful, distant, calculated combat. They had never faced an enemy that would charge directly into weapons fire, that would ram ships together, that would board enemy vessels for hand-to-hand combat. The biomechanical intelligence tried to adapt, tried to recalculate its strategies. But it was using logic and efficiency to fight against an enemy, driven by something deeper. The tribal fury of a species that had clawed its way to the stars by never, ever giving up. Admiral Jiho watched as the last major swarm installation exploded. Around it, hundreds of enemy ships floated dead in space, their systems destroyed. "Threat neutralized," Minji reported. "The swarm staging area is destroyed." Jiho nodded slowly, feeling the weight of what they'd done. His fleet had taken casualties. 43 ships damaged, 7 destroyed, over 1,000 humans dead or injured. But they'd broken the swarm, eliminated them as a threat. Made sure they could never again attack helpless civilians. "Send a message to all Council worlds," Jiho ordered. "Tell them what happened here. Tell them the swarm is finished." "What should we say, sir?" Jiho thought for a moment. "Tell them that humans protect those who can't protect themselves. Tell them that we answer distress calls. And tell them," he paused, "tell them that if you threaten the helpless, you'll learn why Earth is called a death world." The message went out across the galaxy, and the Council worlds reading it understood something they hadn't before. Humans weren't just dangerous. They were guardians, and that made them the most dangerous species of all. 3 weeks after the Battle of Vela 7, Ambassador Yuna Choi walked into the Galactic Council chambers. The massive room was packed. Every seat was filled with representatives from the 847 member worlds. The air buzzed with conversations in 1,000 languages. When Yuna entered, the room fell silent. She walked to the center platform, her footsteps echoing in the sudden quiet. Above her, on the highest seat, Counselor Thex Prime watched with his compound eyes reflecting the lights. "Ambassador Choi," Thex Prime began, his translator making his voice sound formal and cold. "The Council has completed its investigation into the human military action at Vela 7. We have reviewed the evidence, heard testimony from witnesses, and consulted our legal experts." Yuna stood straight, waiting. She knew this could go badly. The Council could impose sanctions on Earth, could restrict human trade routes, could even expel humanity from the Council altogether. "The humans violated 37 different Council regulations," Thex Prime continued. "You deployed military forces without authorization. You engaged in combat operations outside your territory. You pursued and destroyed an enemy fleet, rather than accepting their surrender. These actions cannot be ignored. The chamber remained silent. Yuna felt her heart hammering but kept her face calm. However, Thex Prime said, and something in his voice changed. We have also reviewed what happened before the human fleet arrived. We watched footage from Vela 7. We heard testimony from the 200,000 civilians your species saved. On the screens around the chamber, images appeared. Captain Hana Kang and her crew fighting with improvised weapons. Engineer Dae Hyun organizing defensive positions. Marines like Sergeant Taeho clearing corridors. Pilot Nari Choi flying missions that should have been impossible. And through it all, humans protecting aliens they'd never met, from species they barely knew, risking everything because someone had called for help. We also reviewed the Council's own actions, Thex Prime continued, and now his voice carried something that might have been shame. For 3 days we debated and discussed while people died. We followed our procedures and protocols while civilians begged for help. We prioritized paperwork over lives. The chamber erupted in surprised murmurs. Council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Thex Prime raised one of his many limbs for silence. The humans showed us something we had forgotten. That civilization is not about following rules. It's about protecting those who cannot protect themselves. That sometimes the right thing to do is also the hardest thing to do. Yuna stared at him in shock. This was not what she'd expected. Therefore, Thex Prime announced, the Council will not be imposing sanctions on humanity. Instead, we are awarding Captain Hana Kang the Star of Unity, our highest honor for courage and sacrifice. She is the first human to receive this award. The chamber filled with the sounds of approval, clicks, whistles, hums, and applause in various forms. Yuna felt tears threatening and blinked them back. Additionally, Thex Prime continued, we are implementing the Human Response Protocol. Any distress call received by the Council will now trigger an immediate emergency response, with forces deployed within 24 hours. The humans have shown us that our old ways were too slow, too cautious. We must do better. He paused, his insect eyes fixing on Yuna. And finally, the Council formally invites humanity to join the Galactic Defense Force as a guardian species. With full voting rights and access to all military technology, we ask that you help train our forces in your methods, that you teach us how to protect the helpless as effectively as you do. The chamber erupted in sounds of agreement. Yuna couldn't stop the tears now. She'd come here expecting punishment. Instead, everything had changed. On Earth, Admiral Jiho Nam received the news in his office at Pacific Defense Headquarters. His staff gathered around, reading the Council's official statement on the screens. Guardian Species, his second-in-command, said wonderingly, they're asking us to help protect the galaxy. Jiho smiled. We were doing that anyway. Now we'll just do it officially. At Vela 7, Captain Hana Kang stood in the rebuilt colony Central Plaza. Around her, thousands of aliens from 23 different species had gathered. They'd asked her to come for a ceremony, but she didn't know what to expect. A small stage had been built in the center of the plaza. On it stood a covered statue, tall and imposing under its wrapping. An elderly alien, a representative from one of the saved species, stepped forward. Her translator rendered her words in standard. For 3 days we waited for help that we thought would never come. The Council told us to be patient, to wait for proper procedures. We would have died waiting. She gestured to the covered statue. Then a cargo ship arrived. Just one small ship with 12 humans who had no weapons and no reason to risk themselves for strangers. But they came anyway, and they fought. And they called for help. The alien looked directly at Hana. You saved us, Captain. You and your people. You didn't wait for permission or authorization. You just came because someone asked for help. That is what we want to remember. She pulled a cord, and the covering fell away from the statue. Hana gasped. The statue showed her standing in the center, surrounded by figures from all 23 species. Her arm was raised, pointing forward, and the other figures stood with her in defensive positions. At the base, words were carved in 30 different languages. In standard, they read, when no one else would come, the Deathworlders answered. Hana felt her crew around her, all of them staring at the statue with tears in their eyes. She looked at Minho, who'd been her pilot through everything, at Daehyun, who'd held the colony for 3 days with makeshift weapons, at all the humans who'd fought because it was the right thing to do. We just did what anyone should do, Hana said quietly. No, the elderly alien replied. You did what no one else did. That's why we honor you. Back on the council station, Ambassador Yuna met with Counselor Thex Prime privately. The insect being seemed different now, humbler perhaps. I owe your species an apology, Thex Prime said. We called you aggressive, violent, too dangerous for civilized space. We were afraid of what your death world had made you. And now? Yuna asked. Now I understand that your world made you strong enough to protect others. Thex Prime replied. That your aggression is not cruelty, but the will to defend the helpless. That your violence is not mindless but purposeful, directed at those who harm the innocent. He paused, his mandibles clicking thoughtfully. We council species come from safe worlds. We never had to fight like you did just to survive. We built our civilization on logic and order and careful planning, and somehow we forgot that those things mean nothing if you won't protect the vulnerable. The council isn't wrong, Yuna said. Planning and procedures are important. They prevent chaos. But they can also prevent action, Thex Prime countered. The humans taught us that sometimes the right choice is to break the rules, to risk everything, to act when others hesitate. He extended one limb in what Yuna had learned was a gesture of respect. Thank you, Ambassador, for showing us what we had become, for reminding us what civilization should be. Yuna clasped his limb gently. Thank you for being willing to change. Months later, the first Joint Council Human Defense Fleet launched from Earth. Human ships flew alongside vessels from dozens of Council worlds. Human Marines trained alongside alien soldiers, teaching them tactics that seemed crazy until they worked. Dr. Suji Huang's paper, Deathworld Advantage, Understanding Human Combat Capability, became required reading at every military academy in Council space. Young officers from hundreds of species studied human history, learning from Earth's brutal wars and hard-won lessons. And across the galaxy, on the frontier colonies and distant outposts, beings of every species looked at the stars differently, because now they knew that if they called for help, someone would answer. The Deathworlders would answer. Admiral Jiho stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, now the flagship of the combined defense fleet. Beside him stood council officers from a dozen different species, all working together. Admiral, his communication officer called. We're receiving a distress call. A small research station in the Outer Rim. They're under attack by raiders. Jiho didn't hesitate. All ships set course for the research station. Maximum speed. We're not letting anyone die while we debate about it. Around him, the council officers moved to their stations without question. They'd learned from humans. Learned that sometimes, the only acceptable response to a cry for help was immediate action. The fleet jumped to faster-than-light travel, racing toward people in danger. On Vela 7, the statue of Captain Hana Kang stood in the plaza, lit by the light of the system's sun. Children played around its base, human children and alien children together, the next generation growing up in a galaxy that had changed. A young human boy looked up at the statue, reading the inscription. When no one else would come, the Deathworlders answered. What does it mean? An alien child asked. The human boy thought for a moment. It means that if you need help, we'll come. No matter how far away, no matter how dangerous, we'll come. Why? The boy smiled. Because that's what humans do. In the council chambers, new laws were passed, new protocols established.